This is the 10-Minute Teacher Podcast, episode 706, How I Teach About Big Data and Plan My Lessons, with Vicki Davis. Welcome to the 10-Minute Teacher Podcast, where you'll discover ways to become a more remarkable teacher today. Your host is author, educator, speaker, and mom, the Cool Cat teacher, Vicki Davis. Today, Vicki gives you a peek into her classroom. She's going to tackle a topic that isn't super simple: databases. Using game-based learning, 2 simple projects, and concrete examples, her students are able to master databases in 5 days. Big data and databases are part of your students' futures, so Vicki wanted to be sure and share her method with you. Of more interest to you will probably be how she plans lessons. Vicki designs ahead to ambush common mistakes. Her method of using concrete examples and formative assessment results in mastery from all of her students. This may sound impossible, but it can be done. Enjoy!
This week on my blog, I shared the benefits of using chalk and Planboard and how my school uses them to plan our curriculum and our lessons. Stay tuned at the end of the show to learn how you can start planning in Planboard for free. Hello, remarkable educators. So I thought today that I would share with you how I teach a little bit of a difficult topic so you can kind of have insight into how I plan lessons, how I plan units, and just kind of behind the scenes in terms of the tools I use and how the classroom works. I recently added a unit on databases, and I decided to use mail merge with that particular unit. Now, I want kids to understand what is called big data and analytics, and I've become very convinced of this because my oldest son, who graduated from Georgia Tech, is doing a lot with big data and analytics, and I'm seeing so many students who are in this. So they need to understand a sort of a basic concept of what this means. Now, to make sense of all of this, we just came off of a unit teaching personal websites as the students built their website with Google Sites. So it's just a simple 7-page site that they built. It took 2 weeks, and I taught a lot of different concepts, including the concept of a unicorn. Now, a unicorn, while it's an imaginary creature, it's also a term that Google uses for websites that are highly engaging, that have a high dwell rate, that people really stay on, that they engage with, and Google boosts those in the rankings. They're looking for websites that are helpful, for lack of a better word. So to track this, Google has to keep track of all of these statistics, how fast does somebody get off of a page, and how long did they sit on the page or dwell on the page, all of these things for like every website that they index. Okay, that is a whole lot of data. And that's sort of how I introduced this concept. I'm like, okay, is that a small amount of data or a big amount of data? And they'll of course say that's a big amount of data. And then I'll say, but before we can get big, we have to start small. So we're going to start with something concrete. Now, as I'm planning a unit like this, I want to back up to the big picture. So something my mom taught me many years ago. She's an incredible educator. For my first year of teaching, she brought me a paper calendar, and she said, I want to teach you things that a lot of times, don't get taught. And it was a paper calendar for the whole year for each of my classes. And she encouraged me to sketch out, what all do I want to cover and how much time do I have? So looking at things at the unit level is really important. Now, I do want to mention that I will be mentioning a sponsor of this episode, Chalk and Planboard, because I use Chalk for all my unit planning and curriculum planning, and my school uses it as well for all of our teachers. And then Planboard is free, so all of you can use Planboard. And Planboard is an incredibly fast lesson planning tool. I absolutely love it. Couldn't live without it. It's incredible. So I plan all of this stuff inside of Planboard, including attaching all of my resources and that sort of thing, so that I can actually find it later. I've used some other tools, but always ended up losing and having to redo a lot of things. So I'm putting all this, of course, in Planboard as I mention it. So the other thing that I do is I'm planning a new unit that I haven't taught before is I search for the standards. Since I write the curriculum for all of our technology and I'm always updating it, used to, I would buy a really fancy computer science book, but they just got outdated so quickly that I find it's easier to just write everything myself, kind of like Matt Miller does with Ditch That Textbook. It's still a textbook, but I'm just kind of writing a lot of the stuff. So I search for the standards inside Chalk and then pull them into the unit plan so that I can figure out, okay, what are the standards I want to cover? What are the vocab? You got to know that up front, the terminologies and that sort of thing. So as I teach, I use the terminology. I really believe in front-loading the terminology. So as I'm doing my sort of intro piece, and I'm using the term unicorn, which they already know, but I'm using big data and record and table and all these sorts of things. I'm not getting my students at this point to take notes because I'm just kind of introducing the concepts. Now, I always like to start with a concrete example, and I'm really big on project-based learning for those of you who've listened and known for a while. So I actually start with data in a spreadsheet, and I have them download it in Google Classroom. Now, I like them to do this in Google Classroom because what they're going to try to do is to pull it into Google Sheets. And one thing I always encourage is app smashing. App smashing means that you are using the app that is best for that particular task. You can't beat Microsoft Excel for analyzing data. So I have them download it into Excel, open up Excel, and know when to use that. So I always have them pretend they have a new business. And in this case, they have a new business that's just opened. They have 6 customers who bought up to 3 items. And I've already put the data in this particular spreadsheet. You do not want to overwhelm them when you have a new project, and you want to kind of start them with what's most important. Now, when I have them in Excel, I go ahead and have them sum the data in the column, and I review how to do this, and you'll see why I have them do this. So, of course, a sum starts with an equal sign, and I'll do equals, and then show them how to drag it across and press enter, and it'll fill it all the way down. And then I have them add a new record, and I give them the data for that record, and then to see how the sum pulls it down. Now, at this point, some of them will have a light bulb moment. Now, light bulb moments are important because they happen typically when a student makes a mistake. So when I design my lessons, I always design it to try to catch those mistakes or catch those moments to have a light bulb moment. So, for example, one thing students do when they go into Excel is they will try to type the $ and they'll do space, 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 and type the number, because what they also do in Word documents or in Google Docs is they will try to line things up with spaces. Okay, that's just a terrible practice. You never want them to do that. You want them to learn to line it up with tabs. And in a spreadsheet, they do not have to format because there is something called an input mask. Input mask is a database term. I want them to know it so I can click on a cell and format in dollar or however, that sort of thing. So I'm designing it to try to catch the mistake. And how I catch the mistake is that the sum of those cells will come out to an error if they're using spaces or typing the $ in manually sometimes. They'll also make other little mistakes, but the sum will catch that. And so that gives me a light bulb moment. And when I taught this recently, I got a light bulb moment with over half the class, and I was able to catch that they did that. At this point, I have them save it and notice where they save it. Now, I typically teach my students to try to save it with like -final at the end, because here's the other thing that happens. They will download like 5 copies out of Google Classroom of many different things, and then they'll lose it and then they can't find it. So one thing I'm constantly reinforcing is trying to help them to be able to find those documents. So I try to teach them to save it in the same place and to put something at the end of it so they know what that document is. But invariably, about a third to a half of the kids will not do that. And that mistake will come out in the second part. So then I have a letter already typed for them in Microsoft Word. Again, they're going to have to download it, and they'll try to open it in Google Docs, and I'll remind them we're app smashing, and mail merge is, I think, a little bit better and easier with Microsoft Word and Excel. Now, you could say, why on earth are you teaching mail merge? That's just so 20th century. You might think it is, but remember this. A big data is a massive database that merges with HTML, which is the language of the web. So if I can have them have a concrete letter in their hand that they have merged, and they know they didn't type 7 letters, they actually typed 1 letter, and they had data from 7 different records pull into that letter, the light bulb goes on, and I have a light bulb moment. And that is the big light bulb moment I have designed for all these kids to understand. Databases can save me time, whether I'm on the web or whether I'm typing a letter, which of course we don't type as many letters these days. So I've also, in this letter, I've made some spacing errors. I like to cumulatively test. So I've already taught business letters by this point. So I want them to catch those mistakes and fix them. Now, some kids won't catch the mistakes, and that'll lead to another light bulb moment in a moment. So they will do the merge, and some of them will preview their data, and they will determine that they don't have the sum in there, or they don't have their new 7th record. This leads to the light bulb moment that they have like 10 copies of the database. They've downloaded, or data sheet in this case, and they have downloaded 10 copies and they don't know which one is the right one. So it gives me that teachable moment to help them go back, open up the Excel sheet, look at the title bar, also do file save as, see where you saved it and where you named it. Now, this may be over your head. I know a lot of folks who can't figure out what's the name of the file or where they saved it, but this is absolutely basic. So I often design things in this way so that I can figure out if a student truly understands how to find a file. And they need that light bulb moment because truthfully, it's easy to just re-download and start over. And that's what most kids and most educators do. We have got to help them understand where those files are and what they're named. So at this point, they'll also sometimes need to remerge because their spacing is messed up. So I'll let them preview the data. I'll have them merge. If I find a mistake, then I'll have them get out of that merge file and then redo it. Now, some of you don't know what mail merge is, and I'm not going to dig too deep into mail merge because the purpose of this is really to help you understand big picture how I teach and try to organize things. And you notice I'm actually designing this for common mistakes to happen. Some educators view a good lesson as one where kids don't make mistakes. I view an excellent lesson as one that catches the common mistakes and allows me to reteach and to help those light bulb moments happen so that they become independent with whatever concept I am teaching. Also, I have already recorded videos for each of these steps. So say I teach it in front of the class and I have a kid who just doesn't really want to ask, or they think they just forgot a step. They can replay any of those videos, little short videos. So I've got a video for how do I download these two things and find them. I've got a separate video for how do I do all this in the Excel spreadsheet. And then I've got a third one for how do I do this mail merge. So at any time they can replay the video and they don't need me if they don't want to. Plus, any students that might be out, whether they're under the weather or wherever they are, can also do the lesson that I've shared. And I attach these videos into my plan board because I also share the lesson plans with my students in Google Classroom. So then I've been using terminology. We have a concrete example, and some students are just going to finish earlier. That's what happens. So I always have, my mom used to call them sponge activities. And in this case, it's boom cards that teach the terminology, record, field, table, primary key. And I have them take it until they make 100. And that's really important because I want them to understand all of those concepts. Now, I look at where they struggle and prepare to review for day 3, and I'm ready for that. Now, I also, at this point, as they're doing boom cards on day 2, I also have a fun little Google form where they talk about where they struggle, what food they like, their best and worst subjects, where they'd like some inspiration or that sort of thing. So it's just a fun little survey. And I tell them the whole class is going to see these results. So you never want to spring it and let them think that it's anonymous when it's not. Okay. So I have them fill that also. Now, if they finish and they make 100 on their boom cards, they can go ahead and go into GimKit and they can play to review all these concepts. And GimKit's a lot of fun. I'm still using a trial for this, trying to determine if I'm going to keep it. But, when you have vocabulary involved, there are so many other tools that are far better than just talking about it to help them understand what those concepts are. So I prefer to play games for terminology. Okay, so now we're getting into day 3. Now I open up, I review the concepts that I see in GimKit and in boom cards that the kids are struggling to understand, the terminology, and then I introduce their next concrete example that's going to give them a little bit more freedom. So app smashing, again, is a term for this day. And I have the Google spreadsheet that was created by the Google form. Now, form is a database term. It's how you can enter data into a database or a data sheet. And so I tell them, one of the easiest free ways for kids or for anybody to collect data is to use a Google form. And by this time, I've already had them create their own Google form. So they've already created their own Google form several weeks ago to collect data on their website review. So they've already seen Google form before. They've already looked at the data on the back end, and they've already seen sort of a spreadsheet in Google Sheets and seen how useful that is. So we're kind of building on what we've done before. So as I reinforce app smashing, we do what each app does best. Google Form and Google Sheets best collect data. We take the Google Sheet, I give them all a copy. They download it as Excel. And at this point, I ask them to delete their row. I want them at this point to understand, how do I delete rows? How do I add columns? How do I add new fields? And so they delete the row. And then they are getting ready to add columns. So one thing is an inspiring message, and the other thing is a unique greeting for their classmates, because they are going to create a merge document, a letter to each member of the class, not including themselves, with an inspiring and encouraging message and also a special greeting. Now, at this point, I also like to reinforce what this means, because kids need to understand that it applies to their real life. And I use one of the largest databases in the world, which is YouTube. And I'll show them a YouTube video. I used SailCat for this, which is just a little 45-second, one of the earliest viral videos. That's just hilarious. And I point out the number, and that every single video has its own unique number. And I ask them, well, why is that? Why can't two videos have the same number? And eventually they'll say, well, I'm like, well, why can't two houses have the same address in the same city? And they're like, well, the mail will get confused. It's like, okay, so if you have the same number, if you have the same website address, then people can't go to the video, right? The internet gets confused and it doesn't know which place to go. So each individual video in YouTube has to have its own unique identifier or unique ID. In this case, it's the primary key. And they go, now I understand. And I'll say, and each record in your data sheet has its own primary key. It's just, that number over there, you're not really seeing it, but there is a primary key even for this so that it doesn't get confused. So this is an example of how I'm giving concrete examples to relate it to their real world. And then they create that, and then the light bulb is going on, and I get ready to go to my next work, which is a little bit more advanced data collection and spreadsheets and that sort of thing. Now, this is basically 5 days, and these are some pretty advanced topics. I mean, you could say, hey, Vicki, that's college topics, and you're teaching it to 8th and 9th graders. Well, actually, it's in a lot of the standards, and I think big data is really important. And like I said, it makes it relatable because they're printing out these concrete letters and handing it to somebody and going, oh, I didn't type 7 letters, or I didn't type 11 letters. I just typed 1 letter and used merge fields. And it just changes how they view data and databases forever, because the light bulb moments have happened. But I want to go back and talk about what I design in. So inside Google Classroom, our school has pretty much agreed that we would organize Google Classroom with topics by date, so kids can clearly see by date what they have due. Now, there's some things I'm going to record in a future episode for you about how I simplify Google Classroom for use. But one of the things is I use icons. So I have an icon for the assignment, and that is just a little, I think it's like a check of some kind. And then I have a backpack for the lesson plan. So every day they have my plan board lesson plan posted to Google Classroom, and they can access it. Now, one of my hacks or tricks is that if I take the link for plan board and paste it in the little description box, all of the parents who get Guardian Summaries also get a link to my lesson plan. Now, Guardian Summaries, we went and signed up every parent for the Guardian Summaries. They do have to accept it, but it's a great way for them to know what happened in class, especially as we want to encourage kids who don't feel well to stay home. And that's been really one of the secrets of, we've been at in-person school now for going on 10 weeks. And one of the things is kids have got to stay home if they don't feel well. So we give them a copy of the lesson plan from Planboard. And rather than having to email that out, all the parents have Guardian Summaries that they get either daily or weekly. And I take that lesson plan link and I paste it in the description box. And so that's emailed to parents, and they can see my lesson plans and links to the videos and links to everything. So that is a big secret there. The other thing is I have planned ahead my aha moments or my light bulb moments by designing in ways that kids can make the common mistakes that I see most often as I teach the content. So again, in math or whatever, design your lessons so that the common mistakes will happen and you can help them with teaching. Now, there's apps you can use for that. For example, in math, I love iExcel, and you can go into the live mode where you can see the mistakes that kids are making, and it'll even give you an alert that you can go over there and say, hey, this child is having trouble, and you can run over there and help them, or you can help them at a distance. Things like file names, spaces, looking at the formula bar to see what's in the cell, the name box for the cell number, having to remerge. That data saves time, that big data is impossible to analyze, so you have to use technology. Because I'll also say, hey, what if you surveyed 5,000 teenagers? How would you even grasp that? And they're like, well, we would have to understand how to analyze the data because it's become big data. And then the light bulb goes on that this is something that's part of their life permanently. You do want to talk about privacy, and that is another unit that I teach later. The other thing is, notice that I have 2 hands-on assignments that are concrete examples that the kids can physically understand. Also notice that I still have teacher-led instruction, and I'm giving that too as well. I have 2 different games. I'm informing my instruction with formative assessment by looking at what kids understand and what they don't. I'm giving a lot of one-on-one help and instruction as I observe what students are doing, and you can observe, what they're doing. I actually don't grade. I hand things back for rework until it's perfect. So pretty much all my kids on these assignments are making 100 because I will not accept it until they have done it perfectly and they turn it in and everybody has 100. Now you could think, well, that is ridiculous. But as my friend Alice Keeler has says, there's some research out there that shows that kids stop working on it once they made a grade that they're happy with. And I'm not happy until they understand a concept. I also have relatable examples. I'm using YouTube. I'm using the survey that they have as relatable examples. So this is an example of how I take what I consider a pretty difficult topic and make it relatable and understandable for my students. And of course, it starts big picture saying, okay, how much time do I have? Okay, I only had 5 days for this, which seems like not a lot of time to introduce the basics of databases, but it can be done. I'm also using tools for what they do best. I'm planning for sponge activities that will take time as I'm having the one-on-one instruction. I'm also shooting videos for each little piece that I teach so that those students who are more independent, don't want Miss Davis to have to come over and show them, they can watch it again. And for my kids who are at home. So I hope this breakdown has kind of helped you understand, okay, this is one way that one teacher in her classroom breaks things down, helps teach kids who are at home or at school, works with kids to make things relatable and make a difficult topic relatable. So I just want you to think about as you're teaching, how can I take this particular concept and design for aha moments or light bulb moments? List the common mistakes that students make, whether it's literary terms, common misunderstandings. Think about the things that drive you crazy. That's like, oh, I wish they would understand that. And go ahead and design it so they make that mistake early so you can get rid of that frustration for you and for them. And prepare for that moment, that aha moment, those light bulb moments. So you've got to do some thinking and you need to understand your content. And this is sometimes something that a textbook won't do. This is what great teachers do. They use mistakes as aha moments so that the student can become independent on that particular topic. And then it does take a lot of persistence. This is not feet up on the desk teaching. Yes, I have to wear my mask quite a bit as I'm working in the classroom, but it's just part of what I'm doing. And I hope this helps. Planboard is free. You'll hear more at the end of the show. They are sponsoring this show, but not the content. All this content is my own, but this is how I plan my lessons. I usually print out my Planboard or have it on my iPad so I can keep up with what's going on. And it's easy to share it with folks I work with. I hope this helps. And as always, email me, Vicki@coolcatteacher.com, VICKI, or tweet me @CoolCatTeacher if you have any questions about how I taught this lesson or do anything else I've mentioned. Thanks. As we prepare to teach in a blended or distance learning environment, a rock-solid lesson planner is a must. I use a free program called Planboard for my lesson planning. My school uses Planboard with Chalk.com's curriculum planning tool. This powerful tool links with standards and gives us the ability to do some time-saving, efficient reporting and tracking. The best thing about Planboard is I can plan my lessons anywhere on my Mac, my PC, my iPad, or even my phone. Wherever I work, my lesson plans are with me. And as I said, Planboard is free for teachers. Check out Planboard now and sign up for free at coolcatteacher.com/Planboard. That's coolcatteacher.com/PLANBOARD. And join me and thousands of educators everywhere for this amazing lesson planning tool. Thanks.